October 3rd, 2019 Advisory Committee meeting to order. Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, this is not going to be a normal meeting. Just remind everybody we are on Templeton Community Television, Channel 8, YouTube, and all your favorite social media outlets. We're going to go right into, kind of after talking with Will, we're going to defer the minutes to next meeting. So we'll do that, and then when Lee and Amy are here also. So we're going to go right into the budget workshop. So that's what we're going to be doing for the rest of the evening. The workshop is really going to entail the budget process for the town. We're getting ready to, or really kind of have started the budget cycle for FY 21. We're in 20 now, that's right. And so kind of help us and understand, and as in recent years, the advisory committee has been allowed to be a lot more involved in the budget process. And this is just kind of just a learning opportunity for all of us to get a little further in depth of how the TA, the assistant TA, all the different offices do the budget, and give us a little more in-depth knowledge. So at this time, I will turn it over to the town administrator, Mr. Terenzini.
Thanks for having us. So we've sorry that we don't have it up for public viewing. We'll certainly get that fixed in the next couple of days. This is technology chose tonight to update the other laptop that had the presentation on it. So we're calling this Municipal Finance 101. It touches about 32 slides in total. It touches upon the budget, a process that we follow, the philosophy, and then there'll be short presentations by each of the key members of the financial staff. First, one of the questions was from one of the members was, geez, I wish I knew a little bit more about the terms. Carter uses these terms, OPEX, CAPEX, OPEB, like he thinks we know what they mean. And so I do use them. It's like if you're in your profession, I'm sure you all have acronyms that I very well might not know as well. So when we send this out electronically, we do have some links embedded in this presentation. So for instance, in the voter's guide for this spring's town meeting, we defined the phrase fiscal year, free cash, retained earnings, other post-employment benefits, OPEBs, our capital expense or CAPEX stabilization fund, and our operating expense or OPEX stabilization fund. And over the past year, I think that as a discussion from the special town meeting, perhaps we should add a discussion of overlay and recap sheet. We use those terms a lot, and people don't necessarily know what they mean. So what we would ask you to do is look at this slide, go back and look at the voter's guide. If there's a term that you're not familiar with, then most likely someone attending town meeting isn't going to be either. And we can add that, probably not for the fall, should we get there. But in the coming spring, we could add that to the voter's guide and people could have that available to them. So the budget process, what is the budget process? Well, first off, you need to start with the philosophy, as I do at least, that it's more than a spending plan. It is not just a collection of how much departments are going to spend. So you can't look at them in isolation. We believe that it's the largest policy decision of the year. We talk about the board adopting policy. There is no greater policy decision than the budget it's going to present to the town meeting for consideration. And that policy document answers three basic questions. What are we going to provide for services? How are we going to organize ourselves to provide those services? And what resources shall we allot to each unit? With which, back to top one, provide those services that we're gonna provide. So it's really a very integrated document. It often needs implementation policies or bylaws. We may suggest a new unit, whether it's the Development Services Office or it was Public Works, which needs perhaps a bylaw or a policy to be adopted by the board. Also, we don't just look at it in a year. We're trying to think in terms of 2 and 3 years. Well, if you start, so we may say, we need you to consider in this year what to do about this, because in next year you might act upon that. And then in the third year, it is when it actually has some budget impact. So that's why when you get that package from us, you see it's entitled the Budget and Legislative Package, because when we release it to everyone, it has, to the best we've been able to determine, the policies, the draft meeting, the bylaws, special legislation if needed. So what do we go about, how do we go about preparing that document? Go back to, it's the biggest policy decision of the year. So it starts in September with a retreat by the Select Board, in which they discuss a couple of things. What are the goals? What did you get elected to do? What do you want to make happen in the community? What is it you want to be known for having accomplished on behalf of the community? And if you have a budget book from last year, you'll notice that's that 11 by 17 foldout that has the 3, 4, 5 fiscal years. Are we gonna plan in this year, implement in this year, or is this something that we wanna have ongoing? And that's where the Select Board tells us, the staff, what their direction is for this organization. Also, and we'll leave these for you, they're available online, we put a link in here. It's where we ask, do you want changes to the financial management policies? The financial management policy gives us guidance as to how the budget is to be prepared and how we are to deal with the finances of the community. So we ask, do you want changes to that? Those are the guardrails within which we operate. And we ask that at this time of year because we don't want to prepare a budget that is not in keeping with where the curbs are, where those guardrails are that they've given us. Mr. Bennett has decided to keep me busy over the next week or two. He and I have, I don't know what, Jeff, 4 or 5 items at least at this point? 6, okay, I guess I missed an email somewhere. But we'll spend an hour or two and then we'll flesh that out. We'll take that to the selectmen. What Adam does coming out of that meeting is he takes everything that they've said that night, prepares a draft, he sends it out to the departments and says, when do you think you could get this done? Do you think you need money to do this? Do you need a study first? And they get back to him, and hopefully that will happen this month. And then we will prepare revenue and budget projections. That's that 5-year set of revenue projections we've been working our way toward. Last year it was just one, a couple of years, but that's what the financial management policies call for, a 5-year set of revenue and expense projections. They are only as good as the assumptions that are built in. So more than worrying about the numbers, look at the assumptions. Because if those are really off whack, then the numbers will automatically be out of balance. And our plan this year is to put those on the Select Board's agenda of October 23rd and to deliver those to you all at the same time. The selectmen meet in workshop on November 6th. They would review the draft revenue and expenses that we prepared and the goals, hopefully finalize their consensus on any changes to the financial management policies. Some of this schedule could get knocked off a tad as we try to struggle with when are we going to have a school budget, because we promised the chairman of the Select Board and the Select Board promised this body and the public they would consult with them before proposing those cuts to the budget. And we don't know how big the cuts have to be. So this, what had been a very carefully laid out plan for September is quickly coming unglued, frankly. So you're gonna have to watch that space to see how that happens. We'll need your commentary on the revenue and expense projections by November 18th, because the plan is that on November 26th, the selectmen would vote upon the projections, yes, no, modify them, because when they act upon the revenues, that's what gives us our guidance of how much budget we have to work within. If they say no, or if they want it changed, again, those projections are all done in accord with the financial management policy. And if you don't have a budget book from last year, we'll make you one, or frankly, if you just go online and read the revenue section, it'll give you a sense of how we do that. They'll act upon any changes to the financial management policies, and they will give us any general sense of direction that they want to give us. We then prepare a budget guidance memo to the various departments saying, yes, you can add staff, no, you can't add staff. You can think about doing this, you can think about doing that. Use this as a inflationary factor for fuel or electric. Please remember, we have to add 8,000 for the light department, as they no longer will pick up the entirety of our light bill. And OPS, attached are the selectmen's goals. So if the selectmen have a goal of speed enforcement, let's just say, and you need 3 new speed signs, the ones, we have the large one now, and the smaller ones that get bolted right up to speed signs, well, you best include a request to the capital committee for speed signs, or how are you going to do speed enforcement? How are you going to get that done? So please pay attention to what the selectmen's goals are. So you're asking for the resources, or the method in which you're going to meet their goal. That's the direction. They have a month. Actually, they all know this is coming. It comes on the same timeline every year. So it comes back in around January 1. It gets plugged in, and we have basically 3 rounds of conversations. I sit down with them in general, ask them any questions. If I have a question on something, if they haven't included catalog cuts, if they said they want to adopt chapter such and such, why? Did you give me a copy of it? Did you explain why you want to do that? We send them away. Okay, we need you to come back on X date with whatever, or we're fine. We put all that together, and then as we're reaching the end, there's at least one push out, and then there's what we call last call. Here's the budget. You have, well, what, like 2 days generally, not much more, in which we say, this is it. This thing's going in the printer in about 2 days. And then obviously we present it to the select board, into this body, at the last business meeting of February. That is our process. Happy to answer any questions about it, if you have them. Otherwise, we'll move on.
I do have one question on getting the budgets at the beginning of the year, like in January.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that would help out the advisory is to take and see those initial budgets, so that if we have any questions, that we can help our process get better, to take and end up making our recommendation. Last year, it was later in the year, and some of the members felt that it was too late to take and make some of the recommendations. And one of the things I want to thank you. You listened to us last year about putting a column, but it was on the omnibus. There was no opportunity for us to end up doing this to the individual budgets. I would like to take and end up seeing us have that same column, so that it spills over like you have, and we can end up doing that. Because if we had made, and there was discussion at our meetings about this, coming in late, that they didn't want to take and end up trying to take and end up looking at individual things. It was so late. But if we could have looked at the electronic copies and made changes to individual budgets, it would roll up. If we had done that last year and made changes to, say, select boards by cutting, say, 10,000 or adding 10,000, you wouldn't know which particular account number we were talking about, per se, on the omnibus. So if you have that and it rolls up, and I know that you had underneath the omnibus, you had the 4 or 5 accounts, and you could see those, and it rolled up until it's like selectmen had 5, and it rolled up. I think it would end up helping us and helping the whole budget process to get better, per se, if we could.
Sure, couple of things. One, I am reluctant to release the individual department requests before I release the entirety of the budget and that is driven by the philosophy that it is not a department-by-department spending plan. It is a total approach and policy as to what services we're gonna deliver, how we're gonna deliver them, and what resources we're gonna do to that. And to release departments' requests before that total package is clear, I think sends people off in a sense of direction that the final budget may not be followed.
Well, we may have questions, is what I'm driving at, that they can end up driving back to you and say, can you end up expanding on this? Is this something that is part of the goals? We may not have understood that. And that's what I'm looking at. I'm not looking for us to put the budget out to the public. This is like a working document to me. If we receive it electronically, we can make those changes or those questions when we look at it.
So that's my first reaction. My second reaction is we'll certainly look at you being able to roll up the individual line items, but this committee does not make cuts to the budget. It is more than welcome to make suggestions.
We're not making cuts. We're
you
making
used
our
You
recommendations.
used the phrase cuts, so as long as we're talking about recommendations.
No, I also said that we could increase. If you've heard me say
I think
increase.
what he's saying is we can't do either. We can make recommendations.
Right, we could recommend maybe a
for
higher
against.
number after we have
Right.
look at the budgets. I mean,
We're more than open to your recommendations, and as with the one on training, we spent quite a bit of time going through that and happy to
I think
explore
Kelly had a
that.
comment.
I just wanted to ask, isn't that the purpose of the joint meetings? That we have, we had like 3 or 4 and we came
It
and
is, but I think what Will is saying is we'd like the information a little bit sooner so we can do a more in-depth look.
It'll cut a lot of the questions that may or may not be asked at the joint meetings. I think it would cut out a lot of questions and make the whole budget process a little smoother. I mean, we could end up looking at the budget and saying, okay, all of these numbers are great. This is the only one that we have a question. It doesn't seem, based upon what you have for a goal for that particular department, may not be enough in our estimation. And we need to
we'll-
understand that and probably pass it by.
But I don't think, does each department come up with their own goals, or is it a holistic goal for the community?
They are driven by the goals of the select board, and yes, they each have their own goals, which is in the narratives. The budget is released on February 26th, which leaves the boards over 2 weeks before it goes to the joint meetings. There are then several weeks. So the budget is exposed to daylight for almost 8 weeks before the select board votes upon it.
When does the Board of
And then
Select-
another month,
When does the Board of Selectmen first get the budget, or see
February
it?
26th.
So I'm not sure that we can really ask for the budget before then.
That's fine. If we get the electronic copy,
Yeah.
we can continue
Yeah.
that they can ask those questions
Yep.
and try
I
to
think what
con-
we're just asking for, Carter, is just to get it as soon as you're
Yep.
comfortable saying, okay, I think we're, at a, say, a 90% solution, because there's always the tweaks that go on. And then give us a little bit more time. And I think with some of us being our second year, I think we know how to look a little more in depth into it.
Maybe
And
my
we'll,
saying.
we'll do what we can if we can do that within the constraints of the policy that we're trying to carry forward.
Well, let me just say that when I say end up adding or reducing the amount, it's our recommendation. And our job is to take and end up looking at these and make recommendations that we feel are necessary. They, in fact, in a lot of cases, they're probably the same is what's being recommended by the selectmen, or going to be recommended by the selectmen. I'm just trying to think and end up anticipating that we may have a different, coming from a different direction that's not thought of.
Okay. All right, so I think we understand.
If we
the
can do some
question.
of that within the philosophy, we certainly will do
Okay.
that.
Thank you.
And I don't know why neither piece of technology really wants to work tonight. So do look at the financial management policies. If there's something that you think should be considered, please let us know that. The next thing that I want to speak to is the structure. The people before you tonight represent the finance team. I act as the chief financial officer, and the reason the pyramid is inverted, in my opinion, is because they are the ones that the entire rest of the organization balances upon. And they're gonna walk you through their key tasks.
Okay.
We start with assessing property uniformly for equalized values. Why do I say that? Well, Suzette will explain, or Luann, I'm sorry, different town, wrong town. We'll explain that when we get to a phrase called CAMA. That's done by Luann and her board in her office. So once they have done that, then tax bills are prepared, and those monies need to be collected and cared for. And that is the Office of the Treasurer and Collector. And as those monies are collected and expended, they are accounted for by the town accountant. So they each have their own discipline. They together are not financial management, but they are key members of the team. And what we have prepared, and we have more than you'll ever want to know about each, we'll hand out as each goes to speak. We'd like to have them touch on the main area so people understand how finance flows from beginning to end. Luann, or Suzette? Sorry about that.
That's okay. I'll
Sometimes
answer to
forget
anything.
forget which town.
So I'm the deputy assessor, so I get to talk to you about the assessing and evaluating of properties and working towards the tax rate recap and getting the tax rate set. Which between September and December, that's the major part of what's done in our financial team. Right now, I have a 3-member board, which is elected for a 3-year term. And it's staggered, each year a new one gets
Thank you.
elected. When they're elected, they have 2 years to pass what we call Course 101, that's offered by the Department of Revenue Division of Local Services. If they do not pass it in 2 years, they're locked out of, and they cannot do any authorization or signing of paperwork through Gateway, which could be a problem, because if 2 of mine aren't certified, you're not gonna get anything done. So my board currently are all certified with Course 101. Those 2 books there are my books that are Course 101. They have all kinds of information and actually all the things that you can take. You're welcome to take, and Mass Assessing Association recommends that Board of Selectmen, Finance Committee members, Collector Treasurer, take the course. It's an online course. You can take it through Gateway, offered by Department of Revenue. The only thing you need to get is a sign-off from the town clerk, and that gives you authorization to go into the website and take the course. I mean, you don't have to take it all at one time. You can kind of look at it or go to a chapter that you think would be interesting. Okay.
In the past, she's been reluctant to do that. I asked a number of years ago.
Yeah, and actually, the Department of Revenue's just put that up, I think, 2 years it's been in the working now. I know Jeff's taking it as one of my selectmen. I know Cheryl's got the sign-on to start taking it as a collector treasurer. It just kind of explains a lot of thing in layman's terms, and it's a really good course to take. So, I mean,
Great.
if you're looking for something to do nights. Right now, I'm what we call in a revaluation. I'm currently waiting for my assessments to get approved through the state through what we call an LA3 sales report. A full revaluation is done in the town every 5 years, but every year we go out and we do interim valuations based on sales of properties, which causes your values to either go up or down. And every 10 years, what they call what is a cyclical valuation in town, and we actually have to go out to all 4,200 plus parcels and look at them and review them and make sure we have the records correct on all of those. Also, with the revaluation this year, I had to go out and do all my personal property accounts. Personal property accounts are commercial and industrial businesses. It's everything that's in theirs to run their businesses. If they're an incorporation, they are exempt from the tax. And also, anybody that has a second home, which is a lot of my fish and gun people, the contents of their camps are also assessed personal property. We don't go out, most people tell you the stuff's been in their camps for 15, 20, 30 years and it's no value. So we base the values on all the camps at a 4% of what their camp is actually assessed at. I had to go out this year and visit all the camps to make sure that we're in sync with that 4% to see if we should add it or decrease it, and I'm waiting for that to come back, but I don't expect any issues to come back on that one. As Carter spoke of, a lot of times you'll hear of what we call a CAMA system, and what it means is it's a computer-assisted mass appraisal system that I have in the office, and it's automated, and it maintains all my property data, my valuing, and it ensures that the equity in the valuations are uniform. So that's what the CAMA one is. And the purpose of a revaluation is to develop a set of property values that's uniform across the system. So when I submit what we call our LA3 sales analysis, we do what is called an arm's length sales. That's the only kind of sales I can use in town to value all the various properties. Arm's length sales means that you have a willing seller and a willing buyer, and no matter what they're asking for prices, you both agreed on that price in order to buy your property. So right now, my property's values are getting a lot more above the asking price than what they're asking, but they're still willing sellers. If you sell something between your family, I can't use those sales in a year to force other values of properties that are comparable to you to go up. It's not a market value. I mean, you can ask or get an appraised value, but that's not what we're gonna use in our assessor's office. We're using sales values. And once the sales values come in, we take all the comparable classes. If all the ranches are going up or down, that means the values of your ranches are going up and down. If you're colonials, antiques, et cetera, your sales analysis is what's gonna push your values up or push your values down. So once I get all the sales analysis, depending on how many sales I have in a year, sometimes I have to use 2 years. This year, we're in a revaluation. I'm actually using 2 years, fiscal 17 and fiscal 18. What I do is I put all that into a spreadsheet. It's all coded out on why the sales happened, and then we send it to the state, which is an LA3. So I'm in the process right now, my LA3 is sitting in with my DOR rep. He's getting ready to go through it all, and then it will go upstairs to the head DOR, and they'll approve or question, comes back to my office, and once that is approved, it comes back to the town, it says your LA3 is all set. So then that's the first starting point of our tax rate recap sheet. This can take anywhere from a couple days to a couple months. My sales analysis has been with Vision, our real estate program, probably for about 5 to 6 weeks right now. I'm just finding out today that they're done doing it and it's sitting in the state now. So it might take a couple days to a couple weeks still. So it's a time frame that you really gotta make sure you have your answers and ready to answer things so you don't hold up the tax rate process. After that goes in, comes back, and they tell me it's approved, I go to a LA4 classification. And what that just is that's your start of your recap sheet. It tells you all the single-family homes we have in town. It breaks it into categories. It tells you single families, 2 families, 3 families, commercials, industrials, any way anything is classified in town. And I get a total of that, and it's a total of real estate and personal property, and that figure's used to what everybody asks me this time of year is what a dollar raises on your tax rate recap sheet. So once my LA4 is approved, I start getting calls either from Carter, the selectman, asking me exactly what a dollar is gonna raise to help us in the budget processing. Once that's done, we go to the next one. Then I submit, after the LA4 is approved through the state, it comes back, and then I have to do what we call an LA13. This is what we call a new growth report. In the package you get I sent you samples of everything you want to look. Through the course of the year, once the tax rate's set, you can come into my office and it's approved. I can give you copies of anything you need to see what it looks like. I showed you some blank ones, and I showed some ones that were from prior years. But an LA-13 is a new growth report. So throughout the year with building permits, I or my board have to go out and inspect everybody's property. You put a new house up, we have to go out and measure it, put everything on it. That's considered new growth. You put on a deck, you take down a garage, new growth takes away from new garage, if, of course, if you demo something on your house too. So everything that is done in town, they pull building permits, those come into my office, and we're required to go out and site visit. So I don't just go out for the sake of going out and to hit somebody. Usually if you pull a building permit or something, that's gonna generate us going out to check out your properties. This is all used, put in an Excel spreadsheet. That's new this year. The state's requiring us to justify any and everything I put on my values for growth. So they'll go through that, and once they approve that, that comes back, and now our new growth is ready to put on the tax rate recap sheet. Got any questions, just cut me off.
No.
Okay, and then between the new growth and when we actually start what we call your tax rate recap sheet is different reports are being sent out by my office, the accountant's office, the treasurer, the collector, the clerk. We're all submitting parts of what they call just forms that are needed to back documents on your tax rate recap. So after all the forms are submitted and before we're ready to start the tax rate recap, the assessors come to the Board of Selectmen and we have what's called a classification hearing. Normally we try to have it early November. So we come in, the selectmen will recommend to the, not the selectmen, the assessors will recommend to the selectmen a single class rate, tax rate or a split tax rate. Last year, a couple of the selectmen asked me if I could work up figures for a split tax rate, so you'd assess residential one way and commercial another way. So I gotta work that figure up for this year. And then the board will decide, the select board, on what we have, either single or split. And then once that's decided, the town clerk certifies that we did have a public hearing. And then we sign off on what's called an LE5. That means the Board of Selectmen attended and agreed on the classification hearing and made a decision along with my Board of Assessors, and then we submit that to the Department of Revenue to get signed off, that we have a single or a split tax rate. Like I said, on the tax rate recap, once we do have our classification hearing, then we can start doing our tax rate recap. It's a multi-department process. The assessors, the town accountant, the town clerk, the accountant, all has certain pages they have to do. You can only work and sign on one pages. We only have certain access we can do to it. So I couldn't say, ooh, I don't like what she's doing, I'm gonna go in and change that figure. You can't do that. So each page they submit, and the clerk on the last page submits all the debt information as far as the votes taken in town. And then ultimately, the first page signed by my Board of Assessors, and we submit to the Department of Revenue for approval for our tax rate. If all goes good, it could take a couple days. Normally, a lot of times, Kelly gets a head up and she submits a lot of forms and she knows where it's standing and if they're approving or if they're gonna have questions, which is great. That way it doesn't back it up a little bit. So we can get a tax rate set probably within a couple days to a couple weeks. This year, we're banking on that everything's gonna be in line with budgets not being set yet, that the tax rate will get set early to mid-December. So we try to get everything done that we can ahead of time. On the tax rate recap sheet, you'll also hear us talk about our overlay account. What the overlay account is, monies raised to cover exemptions, abatements, and any appellate tax board that might be settled with the town. Currently, we have no appellate tax board cases, so it's not an issue right now. The money for the overlay is raised on page 3 of the tax rate recap sheet, and then that's submitted as we do the normal recap sheet. The only money can only be taken out of the overlay account by authorization of my Board of Assessors. No other department or anybody can touch that money. I have to submit an overlay report to the state every year, which they see and confirm that we've done everything to specifications. So usually at the end of the year, if we have any extra money in overlay and taxes are current and there's not a lot on the books or anything like that, we might get a request from the selectman or the town administrator to certify money to overlay excess account or overlay surplus. So again, my board has to vote to take that money out of the overlay account and put into the excess one, and then it's voted on town meeting floor on how they want to use those funds. So that's most of the process on the tax rate recap sheet. Just some miscellaneous stuff I want to mention to you is we have what is called pilots with the town, payment in lieu of taxes. Right now, the town has two different pilots. We have one with the Templeton Housing Authority, and we have one with the City of Gardner. After January 1st, I go and just go in and bill them separately from the town for taxes each year. We do have one solar agreement with the town, which is Sunny Templeton LLC up on Farnsworth Road. This was voted at town meeting floor probably about 5 or 6 years ago. We do have a payment plan with them, and it progressively goes up a little each year. It's a 20-year agreement with them, and they were started billed in 2017, and their last payment will be 2036. Again, that's something that I back into the tax rate and bill them out after January 1st, too. The only other thing people have that affects our overlay accounts and stuff is exemptions. We have a widow exemption, a senior exemption, an elderly exemption, a blind exemption, veteran exemptions, and we also have the work-off exemptions. Those are all applications that people have to apply for every year with the town. My Board of Assessors approves them, and then that money's actually taken right off their tax bills. The money that comes off their tax bills comes off of the overlay also. So if we're granting exemptions, it's money we're taking off of our overlay accounts. You do have specific income and asset guidelines, and you do need to file yearly, and you do have to send us supporting documentations. Everything is kept confidential just in case, because a lot of people don't like to give you their personal information if they know what's out there, but it is under lock and key. The other thing other people question me on their tax bills is what we call CPA, Community Preservation Act. It's an act that people passed several years ago. A lot of people get confused, and they thought that means for a certified public accountant. No, it doesn't. It's what it is a additional 3% tax on your valuation above $100,000. If you're valued at $100,000, you're not going to get taxed as CPA tax. But what it is, it's just a 3% tax that does go on your tax bill that was agreed. This is used for historic resources, community housing, open space, and recreation. We do have a community preservation board that you do have to submit and apply and get funds from them, and it is brought to town meeting floor anytime you want to spend money out of your community preservation. So that's kind of just giving everybody what a CPA is. The only other thing that affects a lot of the values in town is what we have is Chapter 61 land. I have 3 kinds of chapter land. What it gives the landowners an opportunity to reduce their property taxes in exchange for them providing public benefits such as clean water, wildlife habitat, keeping the town rural, wood products, food, and other recreational uses for a specific period of time. I have 3. My first one's called 61 Forestry, which you have to put your land into a plan for 10 years. You have to file a forestry plan. You have a major tax break on this, but if you choose to take it out early, you also get a major penalty. You have to pay rollback taxes to the town with interest. So it's a good way to lock in your land if you're not going to do anything and you just want to cut the wood off of it. But again, like I say, anytime you sell it or anything, you're paying back the town. And the town also has the right of first refusal to take that land before you could sell it, of course, for the same price, but still they get the option of buying it back and keeping it in chapter. Also, Chapter 61 is my agricultural land, which is a minimum of 5 acres, and a lot of people also have agricultural/forestry, so some of my forestry cutting plans are also in that. And then I have a Chapter 61B, which is also a minimum 5 years, same guidelines as 61 and 61A, where you are severely penalized if you do take your money out. What it is the town likes to have the people preserve their land, and you're just guaranteeing us that you're going to keep it in the natural state it is in. DOR for this recommends and post the values that we actually can charge our acreage for chapter land. It happens every year in the spring. I have to go in and maintain and change all the values for the new chapter lands each year. It doesn't change too much, but they regulate on how much we can assess the land for chapter land properties. Proposition 2.5 is a big question in town. My major question when it comes to Proposition 2.5, people say to me, well, my taxes went up more than 2.5%, or my valuation went up more than 2.5%. The assessment is an estimate of your market value on your property. Since real estate market changes are based on buyers and sellers, there's no limit on the amount of assessments that I can increase or decrease. Assessment changes are always based on the real estate market. Property 2.5 is not what will limit the tax rate, and it doesn't limit what the individual tax will be, but it does limit the total amount of taxes that the town can levy upon a taxpayer. So when you come in or you get your tax bill and it's over 2.5%, it's not that we've gone over our Proposition 2.5 levy limit. It's your assessed values, and it's two totally different things, and people just, would be nice to understand it's two different things. So what they do is when they set the levy limit, or when we set the levy limit for the town, we take the increase from the prior fiscal year, we add any new growth to that, we add any overrides, which is restricted to a purpose in year one, and after that, certain exemptions are not restricted to that use. Plus, we add any capital exclusions as voted for a specific dollar amount on town meeting floor, plus any debt exclusions that are voted on the town meeting floor. And then if anybody votes what they call an underride, that would be subtracted from the levy limit. There's a ceiling when 2.5% of the valuation is the amount actually levied. If under a spread is called excess levy capacity, our excess levy level capacity is for 2020, or how much we can raise right now, and the voters were authorized it, is $5.15 million right now. So it's not easy to explain to people unless you work it. It took me years to figure out what it was all about. So I mean, again, DOR offers a great chapter on the levy limit and setting it. They also in September has a municipal official meeting the state offers, and that's a good class that they offer to anybody newly elected, that you can go. I think it's usually in Worcester at Holy Cross, and they sit down and they actually go through doing a levy limit with you, or different things that I've done through our office, which is nice. It's offered to new employees. I don't know if any of you went to it, but I do usually see it each year. So if you'd like it, I could always send it to you. Once I have the tax rate in hand and we know what our levy limit is and all my values have been approved, my exemptions, my betterments, my liens, my Title V's are all entered into the billing system, and I can go in and commit the taxes for the fiscal year. This will be at the end of December. In December, it trues up my values that went out in August and November, because your August and November bills are only what we call preliminary tax bills based on the prior year taxes. So always, it's gonna go up a little just to catch up to the figures that weren't in there. And then once I have those all done, I create the tax bills and I export the files to the tax collector, and she steps over. So unless you have any questions, it was pretty quick, like I say.
No, it's good
Just have
information.
one. Excise tax is not necessarily something that you bill out, right?
What, excise?
Excise?
Yes, I do.
Okay, because there's something that just came over about excise tax. I guess it's a new
It's a new program
program.
that, yes, that
And
R&D is
if we
doing.
don't get into that, we can't send out billing from when I got
And
out of it.
actually, it's not gonna affect me for billing per se, because we go through Jeffrey and Jeffrey, so they're our billing
Okay, they're
company.
external,
So
right?
they send me the CAMA file, and
Okay.
I download the system into our
Yeah,
billing
it did say,
system, and I
it did say
generate it.
either the municipality or third party.
Yeah, and I did, I checked with Jeffrey and Jeffrey, and they're right up on the new billing system, so, oh yeah, bills go out too.
Does that mean our excise taxes are going up?
No, I don't know, that's the state. I don't think so.
It's just a new
It's just a
computer
new
program
computer
by
system that's
which
supposed to be real, yeah.
They will be sending the information out and then allowing us to bill from it.
And it's supposed to give us more access on the RMV websites,
Yes.
so,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you, Luann.
So that's
Appreciate
the
it.
life of the assessor in simplest terms possible.
Doesn't sound very
Thank you
simple.
very
Thank
much.
you very
Luann.
much, you did a very good job.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great job.
So once Luann has prepared that commitment and send that over, it becomes the domain of the collector.
So I'm Cheryl, treasurer collector. Luann sends it over to me. We send out the
Sure.
file to the billing company. And when they send the proofs back, we balance and make sure that they have a bill for every person for the money she has committed. We prove that out, and we know bills are good to go out. We collect quarterly, but we only mail out 2 bills a year. Each bill has 2 coupons on it. A lot of people still don't realize that. So you get your first and second quarter. Second quarter is now due November 1st, so those bills are out and can be paid at any time. They're up online, they can be paid online, they can come in, they can mail it. There's quite a few ways that they can do it. The second mailing will go out once she sets a tax rate and gets those ready. We'll mail out the third and fourth quarter bills. We like to have those out the second to last week of December if possible, no later than the 1st. The actual bills will include additional information. They'll have the assessed value will show on there, any betterments or liens, if you have a sewer betterment or a lien on there. From sewer or light and water, it'll be on your tax bill. And any exemptions, if they had qualified, those will show up on the actual bills. It will be split. If they got $500, it'll be split between the third and fourth quarter, half and half. Once the date goes past in May 1st, any bills that have not been paid, the demand will be added. There's a 14% interest rate on those, and people think there's a grace period. There is no grace period. They're due May 1st, and that's the drop dead deadline. After that, if they don't mail out, if they don't pay that, then the next process would be to look at leaning whoever has not paid.
When you send the bills, is there a process that it goes to people's mortgage companies? Or how, can you explain how that works?
We send the file, so Luann sends me the file, I send it to, there's 3 companies, CoreLogic, Loretta, and Wells Fargo. So they'll get it, so if you have escrow, it's kind of a third party for your bank, whoever you use. So we'll get a file from them, and we just download the file, and it pays everybody that has escrow. It gets right applied to their account.
Okay.
So some of them send us checks, some of us it's an electronic.
Okay.
The payment goes directly in.
All right, thank you.
Yep. Tax liens, once the demand goes out, they have 14 days to pay. If they don't follow that and still don't pay, we will advertise it in the paper. Then they can come in, they have another 14 days, and if they do not pay in that amount of time, a tax title, a lien will be placed on their property. The lien will get recorded with the Registry of Deeds. The fee for the newspaper ad and the fee for recording the lien, which is $75, will be added to their tax bill. We have 6 months if we send it to land court. They have a right to come in and redeem it. After that, we can either send them to auction or we can go to foreclosure. Land to low value process is for some of the smaller properties. It's probably just a parcel that somebody has attached to their house or their residence that they don't care about, don't want to pay it. We could have small parcels that we can send as land to low value. They set the rate every year. This year it's $22,548, I think, is what's considered land to low value. We can process through the gateway process like Luann's class. Same thing, we can go in, enter the information. Right now, the fee for that is $515 to process, just to get it in there for an application fee. They look it over. If they approve it, we can auction those off. We have 2 years to do that.
In past year, we had gone to an outside company. That's something that we're gonna be looking at? I mean, I'm asking.
That
both
was
you
in
and the-
14, that was the last time that was
Right.
done, and it is a possibility, we're looking at those now, nothing's been done in quite a long time.
I know.
So there's a lot on there that needs to be
Yes.
taken care of. We're trying to pick away at it slowly, but it is a big expense. You know, you gotta get the lawyer involved, and all these little fees add up when you have parcels. I think last year I posted 40 parcels, $75 a pop. it gets expensive,
And it limits our revenue coming in that we
Absolutely.
can use.
absolutely, yep, yep. So we're picking away at it, we're, trying to get them, we got a few in land of low value right now that we're working on. We have some in foreclosure that the attorney has, so we're working on them, yeah.
Thank you.
Trying to get them so they don't keep piling up. The rate chart is the last 5 years, so that's what was committed, the balances that were committed, what was collected, and the percentage.
And you can see that's come up each year. It's not at our goal yet, but it has improved considerably each year, and we'll continue to work on that towards our goal. And Jeff and I will be talking about that next week.
What did you do differently to get that percentage to come up?
Everything she talked about.
I've been sending out
Hitman.
letters and, lots of letters, lots of colored letters that people don't like. But
When I got here in 16, you had not liened any of the delinquent properties in 4 fiscal years.
Yeah.
I've only been here 2 years, so,
So
We-
between making sure the demands go out, word getting out that there was not a grace period, prior staff would just, don't worry about it. Well, we worry about it. Additional accelerated requests and actual takings, that has improved it. And it's not just a matter of the economy, because this is a comparison, not of '07 to '13, this is a comparison of '15 to '19. So I think it's just been more vigilance.
Thank you.
I think when we did go through and have the auctions for that company, we did take in over 500, 700,000, which was significant amount of money that they can end up having, not coming in, that they can support, what we need, they can end up doing.
right. So some of the other things we do in the office, we do the payables. They get entered in the accounting office, the warrants go into the accounting office, they enter everything in. We print the checks, process the checks, reconcile everything. Investing the cash, make sure that we get the best interest rate on all the accounts. Track and manage the debt related to reporting, keeping, Carter's big on keeping me informed on what's going on with the bands and all that, and trying to get involved in that and catch up with all that stuff and keep up with it and make the right decision for the right time and try to get the best we can out of it. In the trust funds right now, we're trying to move some of the trust funds, consolidate them so they can use them for different purposes, because the money's just sitting there, and a lot of it's like years and years old of how they should be used, and it's this year just not practical anymore, so they're trying to combine some. That was, Mallory was working on that.
That has been submitted to the Charities Division at the Attorney General's office. We had 13, 14 small scattered funds, which are being consolidated into 2 funds for specific purposes, so we can try to get to work in the community. They take their time, they have lots of other things in front of them, but we think it's just a matter of time before that gets.
Yeah, that's always been a problem, because there's so many of them, and some of them have not had very much money. It's harder to keep track of them than what they're worth.
That is why
Yeah.
we've sought consolidation, and we feel reasonably comfortable the AG's office will approve it. We just need to wait till we rise to the top of the pile. for
Right,
somebody
and
to
I
spend some
know
time on it.
last year, something that this committee actually brought up, if
Yeah.
you recall, that I kind of think was catalyst to start the process, so, good.
Yep, so
Thank
that's
you.
being worked on. So, the main goal in our, office is to get the collections up and keep a lot of these things out of tax title, so doesn't get to that point. And then I guess Kelly's up.
So as these monies are collected, they have to be accounted for on another side of the house. And in this state, there is a statutory prohibition between treasurers also being able to be accountants. And that's not a prohibition that exists in a lot of other states. This is one of the things the state does, I actually think is a great thing. In fact, in one state I walked in and the accountant, not only was the treasurer, did a lot of the treasurer's work, but actually had all the checks and printed them out, so like nobody knew what the heck was going on. So with that, certainly as you look this over, if there's questions that come up about Luann's or the treasurers, get them to us. I'll ask Kelly to come up then.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just
Thank you,
interject
Cheryl.
for one thing?
You may.
Because I did hear Cheryl say something. My Board of Assessors always discloses in our annual report that they do not raise and lower your taxes, and that taxes are assessed in the amount sufficient to cover state and local appropriations. Plainly put, the tax rate is what would provide funds for things that are voted for on town meeting floor. So we only submit all the documentation to the state on what values will do, and they come back and say, yes, that will cover it, and this is your rate. My department does not set the tax rate.
Okay, so, my job is to kind of manage all of the funds, basically, that kind of go in and out of the town and make sure all the checks and balances are taken care of and everything is followed for when the auditors come. We follow the general, accepted accounting practices, for that. And the UMAS is the Uniform Massachusetts Accounting Standards. That is a manual that's online through the state, where basically all of our guidelines come from, of what type of funds we have, different types of journal entries, those types of things. The General Accounting Standards Board, it's not, it doesn't rule what we do, but however, if we don't do what they request, we don't get a clean audit. That's when one of the issues we've had over the last several years, we've slowly ticked away at a lot of the issues. We have a few more to check off this year. So the whole point is to hopefully get a clean audit in the next couple of years, so we're hoping for that. The funds that we have are the different ones. We have the general fund, which is your main operating fund. You have the enterprise funds, which those funds earn their own revenue and all their expenses. So there's no, if they were to go into a deficit, the general fund would have to take care of that. But in general, your enterprise funds are solely responsible for their own expenses. Your special revenue funds are going to be your donations that come in for departments, your revolving funds. You have your grants, and you get those state, federal, you get several different grants that we get throughout the year. And those are pretty much your, what they call special revenue. And your capital projects, those are your building type projects. So like the school is in our capital projects. We just have the sewer pump station, that's a capital project. So any of those major town projects that you have are going to be listed there. Then you have your pension, which is the OPEB, and then your trust funds. So those trust funds are, the OPEBs and all of those types of trust funds that we have. Then you have the private purpose trusts, which those are the ones that we were talking about that we've sent to the AG's office to get them combined, because we do have a significant amount of those. So that's where those funds will be located. And then your agency funds are funds that come in and out. They're basically an in and out we have on the books. That would be like your performance bonds. So somebody comes to town, they want to build a development, they would give us money to hold in case that something happens with their project, they don't follow through with what they're supposed to do. We can take that money to try to repair whatever problems they've left the town with.
Kelly, do you help the planning board set that limit for those?
I do not.
You
That
do not?
is-
It's
yeah.
up to them?
It's up to them.
Okay, thank
yeah.
you.
I mean, I track it and I,
Yeah.
I let them know that I keep them abreast of what they still have so that it doesn't get lost. Like right now, we have multiple ones from prior years we're still working through, trying to figure out, do we owe the people, but it's just part of the cleanup of, what we've been doing from the years of audits, but we're ticking those off and making a good attempt to get those all cleaned up.
Thank you.
Each month, we do a monthly reconciliation between Cheryl and I. We go from, and the sewer department. So Cheryl will reconcile all of the bank accounts to the cash book, and once she has that completed, it comes to me. And then I make sure that the general ledger, what we have balances to what she has. If there's any discrepancies, any of that, then I do the research to figure out, is it a deposit we missed? Is it, was there a warrant that didn't get posted? Some fee that came out of the bank account, an automatic fee that we missed that we didn't get taken care of. And we do that on a monthly basis. I also take care of the accounts receivable. So all of your taxes that are coming in, we have those receivables sitting out there for multiple years except for real estate. And so I take care of what Cheryl has in the system and what I have to make sure it balances. That's been a process I've been working on since, we've started the cleanup of all the audits, and I'm happy to report this year they're finally all in line and we're reconciled, all of our accounts with that. The only one we have still outstanding is the sewer accounts receivable, which we're working on that. So we hope by the end of this fiscal year to have that figured out and get that cleaned up. So then we would be reconciled with all our receivables. And on that, once everything is completed, we give that to the select board with a cover page so they're able to review it, see what has happened in that month, and then we send that over to the DOR. That was something that they requested when we did the final audits. They wanted to make sure that we were staying on top of that, and we're still, as of today, sending that to them on a monthly basis.
So they no longer seem to look at them.
Well, yeah, they don't really look at them, but we still do it just to do what they were supposed to do. Then on a quarterly basis, Luann, Cheryl, and I, we work up what's called a quarterly report for the Board of Selectmen. We come and present that. We each have our own section. We let them know what's happened in the quarter. I do a revenue report that tells them what has come in over the quarter. If we're on track in our 25% or 50 or 75, if we're lacking in an area or something like that, I might talk with Cheryl or a department and figure out, what is the problem? We budgeted this isn't happening, what is the problem? So we kind of identify those on a quarterly basis instead of waiting to the end of the year to try to figure that stuff out. And same with the expenses. A lot of departments, you might give them a $5,000 budget, but $4,500 of that pays their software expense. So you're going to spend that right up front. So there's, I give the descriptions of anything that is out of that 25, 50, or 75% usage every quarter so that you know exactly why that spending is off in those percentages. And so once we present that, then that's released then for everyone else to have that. So every quarter you can find that online to show everything of what's happening and between the three departments. Let's see. Then the next thing is we do a certified free cash with the DOR, which I just finished completing, and we got our free cash certified for fiscal 19. It is an extremely time-consuming process. It ties everything that happened in the fiscal year financially to our fund balance for the general fund. And there's multiple pieces that have to fit together for that process. This particular process, we basically give them a high summary of the different funds and what we have and just quick balances, and those types of things for them to be able to put all the pieces together to say, okay, this is what we're going to certify. And then down in a little bit, I'm going to talk about the Schedule A. That's when we tell the DOR all of the details. We took in $5 for this account. We spent $20. We have to tell them every single dollar that came in or out of the town for every single fund, everything we have. So you have to report basically every dollar that comes in and out. so that they have that information. So one of the things, in working on the certification for free cash, Cheryl takes care of the treasurer's cash. They have to see that that balance, because if it doesn't, you know, that's one of the things they deduct from the certification. Because let's say our fund balance is 1 million, but they only certify 750. In that range of that 250, there's reasons that they have said, okay, we're not gonna certify that. One would be your cash. One is the overlay, you know, they take that off. So there's all these different variables that they come up with that they're gonna take away from our fund balance before they come to our certification. So when you see the certification, that's usually not our fund balance. There's always the deductions that they do. And when you go on the website for Gateway, you can see the sheets that they come up with, and it has the details of exactly what they've taken off. Again, some of those things are from prior years that we're still working on, but we just haven't written them off because I want to make sure before we write something off that it's, you know, it should be written off. So that's kind of how that works. Then, let's see. So when we get down to you'll see the actual certified free cash that we had for fiscal 13, through 17, fiscal 18, and fiscal 19. And I just want to draw a few things to your attention. That every year you have your normal, ordinary free cash that's going to be generated by your excess of revenue budget, the money you've budgeted for your expenses that is now, you know, becomes free cash. But there's always certain items that are not normal, that you wouldn't have, that it's going to be one time for that year. So you'll see in the breakdown there that for fiscal 13 through 17, our certification was $1,042,000. So our overall budget that year was $13,697,000. So basically, our free cash was 7.61% of our budget that year. And one of the things that I don't think people kind of understand is because we didn't have a certification, they did certify us $100,000 in fiscal 13, but that was not accurate. They shouldn't have done that. So for all of those fiscal years, it all rolls forward. So a lot of that is from, you know, a little bit in each year that has brought that to that number. Then we also had the deficits from 13, 14, and 15. When I did the recreation of 13 and 14, there was a lot of deficits that were there that, you know, because there was no financials to really look at, that we needed to take care of. So you'll see in fiscal 18, we basically got that money back because they took that away from our free cash. So we had the deficits plus the snow and ice deficits of those 2 years. We rolled forward from that $1,042,000, $181,692, and that particular year we got the school building permit of $150,000. So those are things that you don't normally have. So you have to look at all of those. That's really not a normal. That would not have been a normal free cash. So really, our normal for that year was $1,006,000. And then for fiscal 19, what we've just gotten certified, we have the $1,004,000, and we've got the recoup of the general fund betterment fund, and then our balance rolled forward. So, you know, your regular ordinary is the 1.2. So that's something you really have to look at, that even though they give us the certified number, there's other variables in there that may be a one-time issue that, you know, make that look like, oh, that's a big number, but there's reasons behind all of that. Okay, does that make sense?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So now to the Schedule A. So this is where I said earlier, we have to report to them every single dollar that came in and out of the town for every single fund. So we have to tell, like I said, if we have a donation fund that took in $10 and we spent $50, you know, we have to report that and tell them for every single item that we have. The Schedule A, they would like it to be done by January 1. This year, the auditors are coming the week of the 21st of October. So as soon as they're completed and everything, I will get that finished up, but I don't want to post that and send that just in case they find something that needs to be changed. But that, again, that report, it takes, there's a lot to it. It's not you sit down and you enter it and you're done in, a day or so. Usually that takes about a week to, go through each individual fund, make sure that everything ties together. Because when you do the Schedule A, everything you did the prior year has your beginning balances. So the challenge for doing like fiscal 17, when I had all of the other years, they had been done incorrectly. So that one, it took me almost a month to tie everything together, work with the DOR to get it to tie together, but now it's much, much cleaner and we're in better shape now. Now in my office, we take, oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, Kelly.
So I wanted to touch upon, yes, it's the finance team, but it's also the HR team. We have realigned, formally, the treasurer's office did the payroll, that's now done in accounting. The insurance benefits are done in accounting, as is property liability and workers' compensation. And why have I assigned property insurance there? Because under GASB 34, we're supposed to be keeping a list of fixed assets and an inventory of all of those capital items. It's one of the things the town has not done well. The auditors have spanked us for it. And that list forms the basis of your insurance. That list is considered accounting, therefore, in my mind, she got the insurance. That's the nexus that we made. Also, the OPEB valuations. And we just wanted to touch very briefly to show you what I think this staff, this team has accomplished. Prior to FY12, you devoted around 15,500 hours to these functions. Today, we budget 13,600 hours or so, 2,000 less hours than were budgeted some 8 years ago. And I would dare say that this team does a better job at those functions. On other resources that you can, I think it was Luann said, when, if you can't fall asleep at night or take her course. There's also, and these links are embedded when you get this sent out. The Department of Revenue issues what they call IGRs. You'll hear us use that phrase, informational guidance releases. Meals tax comes out, here's how to implement it. We see a lot of towns have been doing this. We don't think that's the best way to do it. Here's how to implement it. New statute comes out, here's how to implement it. Reserve funds, how should they be used? There's no real law. Here's the way we view it. And so those you can go and see. They've got 10 or 12 years so back, I think, on the website. They're not indexed well, but they can be informational. Also, you have access, as Mr. Spring has spoken, as members of the Associated Town and Finance Committees, to a handbook that's online, that's accessible. That web is embedded in here. But I do ask you to take it with a grain of salt, like the Selectmen's Handbook, like a lot of different things. They are written as if every community did everything exactly the same, and they don't. They're often modified at the local level by bylaw, by policy of the select board, or by what the team considers to be best practices given the resources that they have and the way they have come to believe finance is best accomplished. So, if as you're looking through those IGRs, you're looking through the handbook, and sometimes, hey, how can we do this differently? There may be a reason on that. I've used the little iceberg because truthfully, this is the tip of the iceberg. These folks who have spent collectively, well, I will suggest I mean, you all spent collectively, but I've spent 45 years at this now. They have, we've tried to burn through this in about an hour and a half, hour and 3/4, what's taken us years to learn.
Hopefully there's no test.
Whether it's a term you think should be included in that voter's guide, you know, we've used some of them tonight, CAMA, you know, IGRs. Go back and look through that, and if you think there's a term that you didn't understand or a neighbor asked you about, let us know. We'll come up with a definition, circulate it, and get that in the book.
I think as a general rule, anything that could potentially, well, that's kind of nebulous, but anything that would be ordinary to come up at a town meeting should be.
Yeah, and that's why we're gonna add the overlay surplus, we're gonna add a couple of these things. If there's a provision in the financial management policies, you look at it, you know, they were set up, our goal is to produce 5% of free cash. That was much more conservative than I thought was the right number. Normally it's, in my experience, it's been 6 to 8. The goal is to have an operation stabilization fund of only 5% of your omnibus budget. That's only 800,000, which if you get in real trouble is not a lot of money. So as we approach these goals, there may be time to think about the goal for the last community I managed is 12%. We maintain 12% of the total budget. The goal for the city of Concord, New Hampshire is close to 30%. Why? Because they have a lot of debt and they want to show the bondholders that if worse comes to worse, they can always go to the reserve and get that, you know, year or 2 years of debt payments there. So the financial management policies were put together when things were a little bleaker. Folks were a little less optimistic. And frankly, it may be time to go back and visit those as we get closer to them. Perhaps there's a new practice or a procedure you've heard about from another town you think you'd like to ask us about, please do. The last thing that kind of happens here is, and we joke as we get through town meeting, it's actually pretty serious. You know, everybody's been through that February to May grind, and everybody, oh, thank goodness, and you wipe the sweat off your brow. Adam, can you do me a favor? Just please. Is we actually start when the the annual town meeting is done, we start planning for the fall town meeting immediately. And as free cash comes in, we have a method in place as to how that free cash is to be used. And this is the formula, it's a draft. At this point, we start plugging in. And the policy does not allow us to use free cash to build the operating budget in the spring, except in certain emergency situations. Certainly, we can have a robust debate about backfilling some of it. Some would say, no, no, no. We would say absolutely yes. Happy to talk with you about that some other evening and show you how free cash has been used over the last couple of years. But just so you'll understand the formula, first thing we do is we look at, is there something that we have to do this fall that we can't handle in the operating budget? So for instance, we had a vehicle accident. The insurance company sends us the check. At your house, you put it in your bank. I just happen to have one of these, so I know. You put the check into your bank account, you go to the body shop, and you pay them. Here, the insurance check should go into the general revenues, and we should pay out of a budget line item to do the repair. So we're going to be looking most likely for an appropriation to pay for the insurance, and then the revenues go in. It appears that we will finally be getting BES back, and we will not be able to dispose of it in time. We're going to need to weatherize it and protect it for at least a year. The Main Street Bridge has been narrowed. Our choice was to close it or narrow it down. And I suppose we could do absolutely nothing. Our hope is to get the design up to a point where in the spring we'd be competitive for a MassWorks grant. That bridge, I think we told you previously, around $2.25 million. Cheryl's given you an idea on the tax title.
Yep.
In the fall, when we lien those properties, it's close to, what was the ad last year? Close to a couple $1,000?
Yeah.
So it's, you know, it's almost $150 a parcel by the time it's about almost $75 to advertise them. And then those that don't pay off, $75 to lien them. We sent 7 off to Capola here a few weeks ago. They cost, you know, a couple $1,000 a piece by the time you're through the process. We need to step up what we're doing on those tax titles. We'll have a deficit in the snow and ice account. We'll have some deficits in the annual town meeting, and we're looking at the capital. So we go ahead and we make our best guess, we deduct those, and we say, okay, we have $350,000, $380,000 left. Half should be pushed off to the side for what we call working capital, that balance that you like to keep in the bank all the time, and half is then distributed to these several OPEX, CAPEX, and OPEB reserve funds. And this is, it's right on the spreadsheet. It's straight formula. It's out of the financial management to give you some insight into how that's done. So we've talked a little bit tonight about the philosophy of the budget, the process that we go through on the budget. We'll certainly look at trying to make the spreadsheet a little bit friendlier so that you can see what that does. We're certainly open to receiving any and all suggestions, and we explore them. I think when I sent back the, you know, we spent quite a bit of time on the training just to give you a sense of what really is out there, our philosophy behind it. We'll explore them. As Mr. May knows, we may not always agree, but we try to do it in a professional manner and respond to your inquiries. That's been a lot. I thank you very much for your time. If there's anything quick here now, we'll try and do it. Otherwise, our intent, frankly, is to polish this up and to try to do a Citizens Finance 101 Academy prior to the budget so that people have a better sense of what their municipal finance
That's
is
an
all
excellent
about.
idea, I love that.
And if you have comments as to how we can make that a little bit more exciting for the Citizens Academy module, they did a great job.
Costumes?
In under a week, I sat with them a week ago and I said, I want you to walk the finance committee through your year, the highlights, the processes.
Now, mind you, I
that you
told
have to
him about
follow.
this meeting 3 weeks ago, so.
It took me 10 to learn this, so I'm still learning.
Thank you all very much for
Yeah.
coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Cheryl, Luann, and Kelly, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think it was a big help.
It
I
is.
know it was a big help for me and probably even better for you,
Mm.
learning a lot of the terms. So
Yeah.
Carter, thank you very much.
We'll get that out electronically early next week.
Yeah.
Anything else we can do for you tonight?
No, you gave us a lot. I really appreciate it.
I will say this, Carter, in your defense. There's been a lot on social media about the town having to cut. You had put it out there, if possible cuts early on, long before the school did. I want to applaud you for doing that. A lot of citizens are still not aware of that. I know you made an effort for that. And I know you and I have always not agreed, but I see that. I look at the social media as to what people are saying about the town, and I think even though it was presented to us and it's good for the members per se, I'm not sure on the attention that you will get from the general public on going through this level of detail. There's some conceptions as to what the town actually does.
I would also caution on social media that it's only a very small subset of the population that weighs in on things, that most people remain silent, so.
Well, they're busy. They
Yeah.
get up, they commute to work. A lot of them have an hour and a half plus or minus. They have other things in their mind. They pay us to do that. And the reason that I think I put these folks at the bottom of that pyramid, really
Good
carrying all that
Bruins.
weight. Because if we can't do those 3 things right, why should they trust us to
Good, half
do
hour.
anything else?
No, go ahead. No,
I just want to say thank you to all of you. I've gone, as Carter will attest to, and Adam will attest to, and probably everybody will. I go through a lot of the information in town and I find issues here and there and so forth. And when I bring them back, I don't do it as a personal attack, I do it just because I noticed it. And I have noticed a lot of changes over the past number of years. As Carter will say, I don't agree with all of them, so, I'm just one guy. But overall, I think we are going in a much better direction. And it appears as though we have our feet under us a little firmer than we did a few years ago. And the town seems to notice it also. So, for what that's worth, you guys were a big part of that.
Definitely.
So,
Thank you. So, with that, next meeting is, the 17th, 6:30 here. So I guess I'll end the workshop. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
so moved.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.